Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to everyone on another series of our thought leadership session. We do this every last Thursday of the month. Interweave is a professional diversity consulting organization that offers a range of services to help organizations foster diversity, equity, and inclusion at the workplace. Interweave services include a suite of offerings in POSH, DEI consulting, audits, women leadership programs offered in the form of training, e learning, and art and theatre. You can reach out to us at mira@interweave.in or visit our website www.interweave.in for any help, info on our offerings. You can also follow us on our social media platforms for our upcoming events and programs. Before we get into today's session, please write your questions in the comment sections and we will take it on from there. We also have CC, closed caption, on all the three platforms available. You can enable or disable them as per your need. Today's topic and conversation is on leveraging multi-generational differences, exploring the challenges and opportunities by generational diversity. Our speakers for today are Smita, she's our head DEI at Interweave; Shilpa Shabria, Director HR, OSHE, CSR and Admin at Thyssen Group Industries India; and Asta Thomas, Consultant at DEI at Interweave. Welcome all of you, and over to you, Smita.
Thanks, Mitch. Hi, Asta. Hi, Shilpa. I'm really excited to have this conversation with both of you on multi-generational inclusion at the workplace. And Asta, listening to you, we've had connected earlier as well, to know from you what Gen Zers are looking at the workplace now. And Shilpa, from you as an inclusion champion and HR leader, on how organizations are prepping or have accommodated varying aspirations of Gen Zers. So I will begin with you, Asta. And, increasingly we're seeing Gen Zers occupy or coming into the workforce, right? And this is just my observation, so don't hold me for it. But, what I've observed is they're not really comfortable with very tightly packed workday. Or Monday to Friday, 5 days a week with 9 hours, just doing the same work, because there's so much that they're interested in and there's so many things that they want to pack in a day that this is not something that they're comfortable with. So just curious to know from you, Asta, as to what are the key drivers or motivators that Gen Zers are looking for when they join an organization.
Yeah, thank you, Smita. Thank you for having me. I think you're right. Increasingly, my generation is just not okay with, very, very packed days or not having work-life separation. I think one of our very key motivators is having this work-life separation, balance during our work days as well. And of course, our favorite word, flexibility, right? So, I think especially during COVID, we've come to realize this, and also seeing older generations, I think we really value mental and physical health a lot. And we want to work with people who value that as well. So, I think I personally and a lot of people I've spoken to have just seen a lot of older generations experience burnout and their entire life being revolving around their work. And that's just something that we don't want, right? Apart from that, I think a very key driver is purpose in the work we do and feeling like we add value to it, right? So I think we're not just okay doing anything for a salary. We want to know the impact, the purpose, and the value behind everything we're doing, right? What is the outcome of our work? Are we able to add value to the work that we're trying to do? Do our values align with our employers? And I think plenty of research I've come across and people who I've worked with have confirmed the same, right, from my generation. Another thing I think would be really wanting to work in places where we're trusted, we have boundaries, and we're giving independence. Because I think most people from my generation, including me, just can't wrap our heads around the need for a log in, log out time, right? And as long as we're getting the work done, we want the flexibility to live life as we choose, right? Constant monitoring and micromanagement just doesn't sit very well with us, right? In fact, I think for a lot of people, especially in the urban areas of our country, it's a deal breaker. And I think also there's this increasing concept of intrapreneurship, right, where you're given the freedom to creatively explore and try different techniques and do things in a way that's your style, that's not just set in the old manner, right? And that's something that I have really personally really enjoyed, and a lot of people I know have looked for it as well. And also, I think having a voice. I think this is something that you may also noticed, which is very true. That we our politics and our value systems are very core to our identities, and we don't appreciate being told to forget that at our workplace, right? And to be very blunt, to be just another cog in the wheel, right? And I think we're also a little less tolerant to inequities and being unsatisfied. We tend to speak out more than any other generation on what we believe in. So we want to work in a place that allows for that, right? um, because I think with access to social media and other things, we do have the tools and platforms that allow us to do so outside the workplace as well, right? And sorry.
Oh, wow. I think that, no, no, I was saying, wow, I think that's like a lot of list of what your aspirations are. And I think, I personally owe a lot to your generation. So I think when we started out, there were certain check boxes. Salary, okay. Organization, is it global? Is it Indian? Is it a good brand? Okay. And are you fairly comfortable with your manager? So I think these were some of the key drivers when I started out. But now, like you said, we've gone on to question the purpose. How is the work that I'm doing aligning with the overall purpose of my life? And I think that sort of got more evolved with interacting and engaging with the newer generations. So with that, I'm just moving on to Shilpa. I'm sure that being an HR leader, you've seen talent aspirations evolve over the years, especially now with Gen Zers and Gen Yers occupying the workplace. I mean, what are the specific changes that you've noticed vis-a-vis maybe a few years back when Gen Zers were not occupying the workspace?
No, first of all, I kind of, completely agree with Astha, and I think this is a wonderful chat that we always have. Um, the aspirations, of course, differ, you know, a lot, right? What kind of appeals to Astha is completely dead opposite to you know, Gen X or teen, or even say the baby boomers. Few are still left in the in the corporate world who are still taking some leadership roles. Otherwise, the Gen Y, Gen Zs are all around, and we have the maximum, which is the millennials, which is now as part of the corporate structures. uh, I should just say that generally there's always a friction. I don't understand these youngsters. It's a typical line that's always, I don't understand these youngsters. What do they want? I mean, they don't stick to something, right? And that exactly oppositely for, somebody like Astha would be like, yeah, I'd like to dabble with a few things, right? And if it really encourages and, motivates me and there's a purpose driven, like she said, that's when I will probably sign up for it. That kind of a culture is probably something which the millennials or the earlier generations could not connect with, right? I think if you see generation to generation, baby boomers to thereafter, they have evolved with a lot of things that have changed even in the feminist era, pre-feminist, post-feminist era, post World War II. I think there are too many things those generations have seen. But one classic thing that we see is that, uh, and I feel these generation gaps are reducing day and day. So earlier it used to be like 10, 15 years maybe. Now it's like 9 to 10 years. Soon it'll just move down to 5 to 7 years. You will have new terminologies coming through for generational mix. And at some point in time it'll vanish. And that's what I believe. And that's where I think inclusion starts playing a bigger role, because then it's not about what a particular generation wants, but what does a particular individual feel like doing. So it will kind of transform into that. And I think that's where corporates today need to start working towards, and start ironing out those issues that we have. So, I mean,
Yeah. So a related question, Shilpa. So, when you were saying, sometimes you don't understand what this generation wants. And I have an example for that, which I will sort of state a little later. But, with generations working, multi-generationals working in the same place with differing engagement levels, differing aspirations, do you see how this affects collaboration? And
It
is there any specific area where this, sort of impacts the most? And now I'll come to my example. For me, ASAP means the very next hour. Yeah, if the project needs to be submitted ASAP, I would think it needs to be submitted immediately. Vis-a-vis maybe a lot more people, especially the younger generation, who say that, I have dedicated 6 hours of my time today to this work. Now I have other things to cater to. So the ASAP can wait till tomorrow, which is very stressful for me. And in my mind, I'm like, doesn't this person understand the value or the importance that it needs to be turned in, right? So any examples that you can think of, and how collaborations is affected, or are they even affected?
It does. I will say to a larger extent, because I think when we kind of bring in two generations together, we do not first allow them to assimilate. I think that's a bigger challenge. So they don't know each other. And when they don't know each other, then they don't know how to tackle each one's positives or negatives, or even probably how to deal with it. It's just like personality types, right, Smita? Somebody is a very planned person versus somebody is a person who's, would like to do things at the very fag end of it. It's very similar to that. But I think what happens in an assimilation process so that collaboration does not get impacted is if you can first help each other understand expectations. Listen, I work in a particular manner, right? What's your style, right? Can we align and assimilate and get to know a little about each other? That will just not bring in a better collaboration, which I see often getting impacted, but I also see that kind of builds a different kind of a bond where they're not challenging each other, but probably trying to help each other, right? And most importantly, and not get out of their calm space. So the one who's wanting a deadline still gets to meet a deadline, plus minus here and there. But the other generation which says, difficult for me to kind of fit in a box, but I will do this, I will step forward and do this, because I don't think so anybody is unreasonable. The moment they find the purpose and that foundation where each one of them are standing equally, giving and taking, I think it becomes just better in terms of collaboration. But collaboration does get impacted when this assimilation and understanding does not happen between these generations. I think that's
So
what I
I
feel. Yeah.
Look, I agree, Shilpa. And, just I think a few months back, I was at an automobile organization in their plant, and we were having this discussion. And this person had a very different point of view. So he was telling me that, in an organization like ours, time really matters. So, every 6 or 7 seconds, the parts need to be assembled. And this being the situation, I really cannot cater to somebody who says, I've given my 2 hours, now I need to step out, it's my whatever break. I cannot cater to this. One, secondly, what he was also saying is, he could be wrong, but I just want to get your views. What he was saying is the evolving aspirational levels of Gen Zers and them wanting to do a lot of things is restricted to a particular kind of people. Maybe it's because of the merit of their education or the socio-economic background they come from.
Mhm.
So, you see, in my plant, where I have people from a certain socio-economic background, they're just working like the rest of us. So seamlessly it's going. I don't see any need for multi-generational inclusion at this place. So this is a very privileged ask of the generation. So just as I see you nodding also. So both of you, I'd like to hear from you, does he have a point? Because it really got me thinking.
I agree. I agree, Smita. Um, I think depending on your socioeconomic background, the privilege that you have, the ask that we have from our workplace is also very different, right? People from Gen Z who are in cities like Bangalore or Delhi or Mumbai have a very different ask than someone who might be coming from a rural background, right? But increasingly, I mean, with education systems that are trying to integrate people from all kinds of backgrounds, I think this will change, right? This will change. So I think at this stage, because Gen Z doesn't take up too much of the workforce, it's very easy to say that, this is not something that we need right now. Everyone's able to work together right now. But in the future, very, very soon in the future, my generation is going to be most of the workforce, right? So it's kind of like delaying the problem if you're not trying to have multi-generational inclusion right now. So of course there are differences with socioeconomic background. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add saying, of course, there is a difference. There's a vast difference, actually. While technology and education, like Asta mentioned, is kind of, helping, I think it's not bridging the gap yet. And that's where I think corporates have to get into that entire sphere where it's not attended to and bring, the workforce to that balance. Will we be able to achieve it? I think there is huge potential there, Smita, because the entire rural segment is currently untouched in lots of scenarios. We have probably they coming into only the mainstream jobs, which is manufacturing, just because of uh, some of the questions that we get, saying, I'm only an IT, I passed. How can I contribute to somebody who's a tech engineer? They're they seem to be very savvy in terms of communication and English and everything. I don't stand there. And these are the kind of challenges the rural side of workforce faces. But I think that's where corporates come in between, just to bring in this whole balance between the workforce so that the socio-economic aspect is not impacting the organizations. And rightly, in certain segments and industries, it may not be the urban population which will suit that job. And that's fine. And probably that's an opportunity for us to bring in the workforce from the interior parts of the world, or in India as well, right? Which we are missing out. We are only thinking that I have to bridge this generational diversity gap, but we are only trying to talk about it from an urban standpoint. The inherent nature of Gen Z's won't change if it's a rural or an urban. I think the nuances of putting it across changes. I'll give you a classic example. We have various manufacturing sites. We have various site locations. The temperament of Gen Zs is similar. I don't like to work here versus I would prefer to do this. I will do this. I know my limitations. I know the area that I can only work. Even in that, they tend to select. So I would kind of, believe that the inherent nature of that particular generation is not going to change. It is going to be a lot of assimilation only for the rest of the generations to start working towards finding an equal space for each other and make them more inclusive, rather than saying they don't do this, they don't do that. Look at it also from a perspective what they do. I think you'll find much better ways to deal with the positive ones than to just linger onto the negative aspects only.
I think that's a wonderful perspective, Shilpa, and sort of aligns with what Asta said. If the problem statement remains, it's only to an extent of how long can you delay addressing it. So, Asta, related to that, most of your friends and classmates have now moved on and working in different industries or sectors, right? So, are there discussions around how one experience, let's say, a traditional workplace vis-a-vis the new gen workplace, where it's more of Gen Zers together? So, I've met up with CEOs who are late 20s or early 30s, right? So that sort of setup, there's the new gen organization, and is there a preference of one sector over the other, and why?
Definitely, there's definitely a preference. But before that, I just wanted to say that I don't think my generation is experiencing the traditional workplace at all, right? Because most people of my generation started working during the pandemic, right? Which was already a very untraditional setup, not the usual go to office, come back home, 9 to whenever space, right? And because of that, I think and also we started our work during a recession, right? So our work environment itself is very different from previous generations, right? And this has led to a couple of things. Firstly, there is definitely an increasing sentiment of not wanting to work for MNCs, right? Which especially expect your work to be life, right? Due to the recession, I think many people do not take job security for granted, right? I don't think anyone's of that illusion that, yeah, I'm going to start in this company and retire in this company. No one's thinking along those lines anymore. And I think also a lot of people started their work with work from home models, right? So suddenly, now that the pandemic has kind of died down a little, I mean, there are waves that come back, but more or less, this complete work from office model is just not something that we can relate to at all, right? uh, I don't think we've experienced the traditional workforce as older generations have, right? But that being said, I think there is definitely a preference for companies that have more people from our generation, which tends to be startups, right? Which tends to be smaller organizations, because they also give us the space to function in our own style, right? They give us the space to explore creatively, and also the space to fail, right? Which is necessary for any sort of innovation, right? Whereas when you go to older companies where the management, the leadership tends to be older as well, um, they can be quite set in their ways that this is your work and this is what you need to do and this is how you need to do it, right? And in terms of sectors, I would say tech is definitely a sector that a lot of people from my generation are leaning towards, right? Because it is the present and it is the future, right? And there's no doubt about that. But apart from that, I think across all fields, across all industries, there is generally a preference to work with companies that allow you to do things the way you want to do it, right? So more or less.
Fair point. And, have you experienced any specific gaps working with age diverse group, especially the older generation? And I know I'm putting myself up for feedback, considering this is, I think, your first job, and we work very closely. So yeah, go ahead. I mean, especially working with older generation, what are the gaps that you see in? Like I said, it's a feedback to
Of
most of
course,
us.
of course. There are gaps, Nata. There are definitely gaps. Firstly, I think there's a definite gap in how we communicate and understand things. I think, my generation's way of communication and slang is sometimes difficult for older generations to relate to, and vice versa. I remember when I first started working and, I was added to these office groups, I was like, what are these emojis? Why are there flowers? Why are there so many dots? I couldn't understand the work communication style. But then, soon I understood that it's the same way, the other way around, right? So I think our way of communicating can sometimes be a little different. Another challenge I've seen, I mean, not specifically with you or anyone I work with, but just generally, a lot of people only see us for our age, right? For some reason, my generation has gotten this stereotype of being the lazy generation that just wants to make TikToks and be on Instagram and scroll their phone all day. But I don't think that's true, because we do all of that, and we've also had more access to tools and resources and education than any other generation before, right? And because of the work circumstances, we've learned to adapt a lot faster, I think, than other generations, right? We pick up things quite fast. We're okay to not have that security. We don't need to play it safe all the time, and I think that can lead to a lot of innovation, which is sometimes dismissed, right? Sometimes people have this thing that, you just started working, just learn from people older than you, they know how to do it better, right? Which I don't think is necessarily true. I think generations can learn from each other, right? There's a lot that we can learn from people who have been in the industry for a long time, and vice versa. I think, one part about being lazy and tech savvy is that we find smarter ways to do things, right? We don't need to take the same old route. And another thing is, of course, the work life separation I spoke about. And we also tend to see a few things which people who have been in the workforce for a long time might not see. So for example, in policies, um, one of my colleagues, she was like, yeah, policies are like this only. But because I'm new to the workforce, I was like, no, this is not the way it should be. And that
So
changed
hold
my.
on to that thought, Asta. My next question is related to this. And I think one
Okay.
thing that I clearly see at play here is, I think between Shilpa and me, we're very measured in what we're saying. And Asta, you hold no barrels. You're just saying as it is. I think that's another thing that increasingly we're seeing. You say what's on your mind, and you do not fear, or you don't think that one needs to be balanced, right? So that is beautifully being played out here as well. So my related question on that. So what do organizations at a systemic level, from a mindset level, need to do increasingly to ensure that Gen Zers feel welcome and accepted?
Right. I think, firstly, don't assume what we're like, right? Trust and let us do things the way we want to. Give us the space to do that. I'm not saying that, okay, you do whatever you want, but give us the space to do things the way we want to. And that actually might lead to a lot of innovation and smarter and faster ways to do things. Another thing is, understand that aspirations are changing, right? We're not going to be motivated by the same things. The salary is not enough. It's not enough. We need to find purpose in our work. We need a lot more things. I think we're a little more picky, right, compared to the older generations. So have an understanding of changing aspirations and don't be resentful about it, right? Because the new workforce is going to be mostly us only, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is, have flexibility. I think hybrid models are anyway becoming more and more popular, and that does give us the flexibility, but also gives the space for the traditional work models where you come to work and interact in person. And also, I don't know, give us a space to fail and learn, and don't stereotype us. I think those would be the broad things I could say. Don't take bluntness as rudeness. This is one thing.
Yes. Yeah. So as you were speaking, about the new workforce going to be us, on a lighter note, I wanted to say we're not going anywhere. Okay, but
Yeah.
then that's the you're increasingly it is the Gen Zers that are going to be occupying the workplace more. So Shilpan, considering that there are so many, I mean, like we spoke about evolving aspirations, different ask, how do you think we can really prep? Organizations can really prep to accommodate such varying interest level aspirations, and cater to the other generations who are already in the workforce as well. So
Yeah.
at a policy level and like I asked us that at a mindset level, what are maybe top three things that organizations can do? Top three, four, whatever. I mean, some really key things that organizations can do.
Yeah, I think the first thing that people have to do is to think inclusion everywhere, Smita. And I think this I will reiterate maybe multiple times during my conversation to everybody is that irrespective of age, color, gender, anyone, one should feel accepted in the organization. I think that's the level one, right? Which means to say, like Astha mentioned, that don't assume that we will do certain things. Similarly, I think even the Gen Z generation should not be assuming that the other generations are going to be behaving in XYZ way, because they are also going to be trying and stepping to understand who the Gen Z's are. So I think inclusion has to be the top agenda for every organization to make some of these barriers, or these elements that we have, in the organizations broken for everyone to be respected. Third thing, I think increasingly what we see is that I will go back to the point that recently we are speaking of the baby boomers who have retired from the organization also resuming work back in different modes and ways, right? And if you see, a lot of them who are coming back in a very different manner. They're coming evolved with the experience that they have. They're trying to learn on the technology piece which they were not aware of. They are trying to figure out what these generations need. So you have a very different age group trying to come back, the 65, 70 plus, who are still coming back in different forms and also still trying to drive the entire inclusion and diversity agenda, either being part of board, either being part of senior leaders, being advisors in the organization, you name it, they are coming back. It just tells you a story that while the corporates are running in XYZ manner, there could be the largest workforce, which is the Gen Zs, which are entering. And then you also have the earlier generations who had retired also re entering the workforce in small ways. And that's kind of removing a lot of agendas which were never there as part of the organization's top three strategies, now coming back, which is, like I said, inclusion is there, making policies more effective for corporates and not looking at a particular generation? Does it make business sense than just looking at it saying, does it make sense for an XYZ generation? Because the idea is that the policies should help enable everyone to be successful, a Gen Z, a Gen Y, or a millennial, or anyone. So how can and to do that, believe me, I know a lot of organizations who are literally using chat gpt to figure out how can you make your policies more inclusive for all these generations. Okay. And who's that? It's the Gen Z's who are trying to dabble their hand at this and say that, hey, what, what, I know you want to be there. Here's where I bring in technology which tells me better, I can get you better insights, analytical advice is also available to you to make database decisions. So I think the second point becomes is enabling technology to kind of build these policies in a way that is going to help a multi-generational workforce and not just a particular generation. And again, I don't want to go by the view that all Gen Z's believe that it is, they don't like standard jobs. There are exceptions there who believe that I like coding, I like technology, I like very serious research and engineering work to be done, and they're specialist. What they probably don't want to do is, like Astha mentioned, in a typical as a very typical way of don't put me in a room and tell me when to do it. I'll figure it out even if it's in the night. And that's where I think policies will start making that inclusion felt for people. So that's my take, that there will be lots of things happening. And I kind of not tend to believe that generational diversities or differences will actually eat up, but I believe that they will actually bring in a lot of value add to the business in their own forms. It could mean a bit of friction in the initial stages, but believe me, that friction will bring out the best for all the generations that are there.
Absolutely, Shilpa. Now, I have a lot more questions, but I'm also cognizant about the number of questions that have come in. So I mean, it may not be in the flow because there are just too many questions for me to pick from. So I'll just, pick up a few, and maybe Asta, please chime in wherever required. One is on how can organizations really measure the effectiveness of their efforts to leverage multi-generational differences in the workplace? I don't know if there is a straight answer to this, but Shilpa, I'll let you take a shot at it.
The very fact that if you're able to bring in more Gen Zs and retain more Gen Ys and and the millennials, I think it's about retention and bringing the workforce together. That's one way of measuring, but I mean, literal sense of measuring. But if you have to really see the essence of it, you will see it in the culture, where I think every generation is respecting each other. You don't have one overpowering another, right? And making them feel uncomfortable. And that those are the softer aspects of an organization, and culture speaks for it. So I think that's the best way to kind of measure what's happening, or it's really working. And more importantly, I think retention is not for the time, not just now, but can I bring the person back into the organization at some point in time later also? For me, that's also retention. And the reason I say that is, maybe today they want to do something else, and that's fine. Give them the space, let them go figure it out. If they feel that you have given them a better culture and an environment, they will come back. And that's what will speak volumes for in terms of measuring, is it really working? And it's also just giving space, right, Smita? Somebody wants to achieve something in their career at that point in time, so they go, they come back. But I think that just tells you that you're probably treading on the right path. I would probably measure
Right.
it that way.
Yeah, I was also reading this article where they said, more than 70% of the Gen Zers are very careful about the organizations that they want to work for. So they're very picky. There's a
Culture.
lot of research that goes into before they can even interview with us. So the fact
Exactly.
that, they have agreed to interview with the organization and agreed to join the organization, I think that itself is a measure of, whatever you've done, right?
Yeah.
Asta, do you have
Yeah,
anything to
I
share?
just wanted to add here. I mean, I completely agree with Shilpa. I think the culture will speak for itself. And another thing is, I don't think retention is a good measure anymore of how well your company is doing. A lot of people don't want to stay at a company long, even if the company is great, right? Because they want to learn, they want to experience new things, right? So I don't think retention can for very long be a measure of how well a company is doing. But definitely, if you have a good work culture, they will come back, right? If they want to stay in the same field. I just to add to what Shilpa was saying, I think another good way to know where your company is to just do a survey, right? Many times, people try to figure out how the company is doing by just talking to a few people, and that of course leads to a certain bias because you'll only talk to a particular number of people and people who you are most likely to talk to. Just do a survey where it's very simple, right? Where you understand what is the perception of the company from the employees, what is their experience, and also do a diversity representation check, right? I think that's not the only measure, but it's a good measure, right? How many people from different generations do you have at leadership positions, at various senior leadership, middle management, etc. um, and you can also filter them according to generations, right? So how is a particular generation experiencing the workforce? It's a very very simple survey that I think every company can do, and it's a good dip check of how the company is doing. And what I would personally do, I mean, I work with data, so I keep thinking about this, is do it once. When you make a change, do it again. Do the same survey again, right? After a certain period of time, and compare the results, and you'll be able to tell, right? At least to some extent, how the companies move forward. Yeah.
So we have a question on what strategies can organization employ to build the generational divide and promote collaboration. Something that I heard works very well in Tata is the reverse mentoring. So you
Mm-hmm.
have the newer generations mentoring the older folks. Campus Joy is actually mentoring the C-suite employees on just getting them to adapt to the new ways of working. Has it worked, not worked? I don't know, but would love to hear your thoughts as to what could be some of those definitive strategies.
So, I think, okay, what strategies can employ bridge the generational? I just wanted to keep it simple, right? I mean, there's no big strategy that we have to really develop. I mean, if you really want people to be themselves and come to work, you provide a good environment and a good boss, and you give them a space that they can be innovative about it. I think that's your best strategy to bridge any gap. Because if the individual is liking what they're doing and the place where they're doing, and their boss is not hovering on their head but allowing them to be more innovative and be themselves, I think that itself is your best strategy, Smita. Because we can draw out strategies for 3 years, 4 years, but the crux of anything is giving people space to be themselves. And that's where most of us in corporates kind of miss the whole point, saying, I'll make a 5 point strategy for this, I'll do this, and I will do that. But that's too tactical. I think rather than looking at the tactical stuff, it's very, very important to look at the basic foundations. Maslow's hierarchy does not change anywhere, right? Even in corporates, even now, irrespective of any generation, basics first. And I think that's very, very important. And that just differs from generation to generation. So if you let them be who they are, I think you're meeting those strategies. But where we actually get into a situation is always trying to put fancy nice slide to say, I will do X, I will do Y, I will do 100 things. But believe me, at the end of the day, what they want is an environment that is allowing them to be themselves, innovate, and you know just do good, and also have an environment which is more positive and with their boss, not having a negative environment.
And constant dialogue. I mean, what stops you from talking to each other and
Exactly.
understanding each
Speak.
other? You really need these grand scale strategies to ensure how to maybe collaborate with each other,
Exactly.
something that I've
Just
also
speak. If you
thought.
don't like, say it. That solves hundreds of problems or misconceptions that people have. Yeah. Asta, any thoughts that you have?
I completely agree, Shilpa. I completely agree. I mean, I personally work with people who are much older than me, right? And I've never had a problem because we constantly talking about it, right? Like, my manager and I think we have a different point of view to things, right? But we always discuss our different points of view and find a way to accommodate both of them, right? And we respect that as well, right? We respect that we have differences of opinions and no one is right or wrong. It's just a difference of an opinion, and I don't ever feel scared to share what I feel. And I think that's what's always made me feel comfortable, right? Constant dialogue, having the space to be who you are. I completely agree.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
So, Mitch, I'd also request you to flash the questions, as and when I ask them, so that'll be helpful. The other one is, how has technology influenced how different generations communicate and collaborate, and what are some of the benefits and drawbacks of these changes?
Oh, multiple. I think technology's played a bigger role in helping be collaborative, because um, there was a generation which did not know mobiles. There was a generation that did not know Teams. There was a generation that did not know Zoom, Team, whatever you call it. And then they figured it out. I think that's the whole point about this human race, right? You put them in a difficult situation and they know how to come out of it. We're so resilient and we know how to overcome these challenges. Technology has not just strengthened the whole collaboration piece today, but has probably opened up a very different dimension of where people unlearn things which they are not supposed to be doing as they move ahead in their career or life. I think that's also one area which technology has played a bigger role. And lastly, it's probably started probing a lot of people to make decisions based on data and not just by gut feel. And that's kind of also, bridged a big gap. Used to be a big gap between generations. That's kind of also now mitigated with technology. Uh, I think the speed at which technology is changing, adaptability is a challenge, and that is something organization needs to play a very big role in terms of saying, okay, I have a new technology, how quickly can I get my people accustomed to it, instead of they lagging behind and feeling very uncomfortable saying, oh, I don't know this, right? That I don't know makes them feel helpless, and that is not a positive sign for it. So I think organizations have a bigger role to say that, how can I make technology very quickly adaptable rather than making it complicated. I think that's the only gap we need to bridge from corporate perspective. Otherwise, humans are lovely, they can just quickly adapt to anything very fast. Asta, your
So,
thoughts?
I no, no, I just completely agree with everything you're saying, Shilpa. Honestly, I think just
so
one thing
that's
to add here,
multi-generational collaboration happening right here
exactly,
as well.
in action.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true.
just
That's true.
just just one thing to add here. I was having a conversation with someone, I mean, in their late 50s, who is in a different company right now. And one thing that he was telling me was that, I want to understand chat gpt, I want to understand how to use all these different fancy technologies that your generation uses, but I don't know where to learn from, right? Because I feel like if I ask someone, they might label me as the boomer who doesn't understand technology, etc. So I think, creating spaces where people can openly ask and say that, hey, I don't understand this, but I want to learn, can you teach me or can you help me out with it? And I think if people had that assistance, it would be much easier to adapt as well. Because you're right, Shilpa. I think people do understand the importance of technology. And even older generations who did not have mobiles and stuff at some point of time understand that they need it now. So it's just about creating a space where people are open to talk about it and also teach and learn both, right? Like
I
I have
just
personally taught people who did not understand, right, and they
house.
learned very quickly.
Yes.
They learn
No, that,
quickly. It's just a matter of,
Was there
I
a
can.
perception that they may not learn quickly, Asta? I mean, because you
yeah.
seem to be surprised that they learned very quickly. So
True,
I'm
there
just
is that.
asking.
There is. I agree. I have that bias for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no, but
Shilpa, you.
I kind of really agree because I've seen my mother-in-law learn very inquisitively learn Instagram or WhatsApp, and constantly she was to say, what do I do with this, what do I do with that. I think that basically says that they're open. I think the question comes is all of us have our unconscious biases that probably next generation or a Y generation is hesitant, to ask, to share, to think or use it. But I believe that everyone's open to learning technology. It's we have to make things available and help them adapt to it fast. And I think there is where we have to put effort of and again, one way of making people learn will not be easy, right? What works for someone like Astha would not work for somebody who's in their 60s or 70s and somebody in their 50s, right? I think the speed at which they will learn and the way we also teach them will differ there. I think that augmentation is something that we will have to do.
So, there's always this debate, is technology an enabler or a derailer to inclusion? And I think very beautifully both of you put that, if used the right way, it is actually an enabler to inclusion. Right. So we also have a question, I think, specifically asked that as a young generation, what are some of the key skills or knowledge areas that we should focus on developing to effectively work alongside and learn from older generations in the workplace? It's flashed on the screen.
Mm,
So I'm sure there
I
are
think
some learnings that you picked up from the older generation as well, while there are lots of things that we've picked up from you. So curious to know what are some of the specific skills that you've picked up from the older generation.
oh my god, I've learned so much from the older generations. I think one thing, one stereotype that's there that I think is at least true for me, is that we don't manage our time very well. It's very last minute, right before it's due, sort of thing. And I think I've learned how to manage multiple things together all at once, multitasking all at once. I've learned really, really well from at least people who I work with who are older than me. And I don't know. I think somewhere, I don't know if it was because of the pandemic or more technology, there is a little loss of human touch that has probably happened over the last few years when everything went online. And I learned how to, do that in person and connect the old-fashioned way a lot from older generations, which I think is something that we just can't lose, right? That's something that we still need. And I don't know. I think, Smita, personally, I have learned most of my work from people who are older, right? So there's a lot of value in learning how things are done already, so that you know how to make improvements, right? You need to know what's there to be able to know how to improve it as well. So I don't think it's a younger generation, older generation thing. You just need to be willing to learn from whoever, right? I
True.
I think when we stereotype and say that, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to learn someone who's older than me, and this is what I choose to learn from someone who's younger than me, then we really limit all that we can learn from someone, right? I don't think this is, yeah.
I completely agree to that, Asta. And Shilpa, what impact do generational differences have on leadership styles and decision-making processes? And how can organizations navigate through these differences? Mitch, can you also flash it on screen, please?
I haven't seen major changes in that have led to these differences. Basically, I mean, on decision making, I haven't personally seen that because it's always driven what does the business need at the end of the day, Smita, and it's never driven by you know does this decision affect a particular generation. I think we've not looked at it, and I think organizations should not look at it that way as well, because then what you're trying to do is at some point in time you'll start creating those stereotypes and barriers unconsciously, by making those decisions itself. The moment we kind of say that our decision making is going to be absolutely based on logic, based on something which the business needs, which the talent needs, and that could be any generation. If today, if we are expecting one of our mid-level managers who's probably in their 40s, a millennial, or early 30, late 30s or something like that, if we expect them to be doing a cohort somewhere, we're expecting them to do a cohort. Yeah, the only thing that we would do is to see how it meets their aspirations and their career development initiatives, right? I mean, on their career development side, we wouldn't say that it is for XYZ generation do this versus XYZ generation do that. I think that's something that organizations will not be doing and should not be doing if it's happening, because we'll only create more unconscious biases. And with time, when we see these generational gaps being bridged because of inclusion initiatives that organizations are taking, I think it becomes more and more a reason that you should not get into that trap at all. That decisions are based on generational differences that we have. And I don't know if it'll add value to business at the end of the day, right? Because we're all ensuring to make the organization successful while we make the individual successful also. So I think it's a two-way street, not just one way.
I agree with you, Shilpa, because when we sometimes label things as being a generational divide, we automatically say that this is something that we might not be able to work on, right? We take away responsibility, right? That, hey,
Exactly.
this is just a generational difference, so we can't do anything about it. But
Yeah.
when we see it as just people having different personalities, having different work styles, um, and something that can add value, and not something that we can't work on, I think that's a much better way to look at it. I think, accepting multi-generational differences does not mean that they can't be worked on. I think this is one stereotype that is definitely very prevalent, right?
True.
Yeah.
And also, I think, if you have a healthy balance in the organization, that sort of, you start complementing each other. So I remember when Asta had come in, I think she had a lot more older generation and she was, probably the one or two people who stuck out, right? But now I'm seeing there is that healthy balance. We have a lot more newer people coming. So I would say, we learning from this generation, then they're learning from what we're doing. And that sort of very beautifully played out in a very stressful, I would say. We have a conference that we sort of have every year, and for us, all that back end work is so stressful, but the way both of us combined and gave it a very successful culmination was, I would say, a case study on its own. I mean, Asta, I'm sure you would agree, right?
I agree. I completely agree. Yeah.
I had a question that was flash Mitch from Akash Thomas, a rather lengthy question. Would you just flash that for us, please? Yeah. So, Shilpa, Asta, I mean, I'm not going to read this out because it is quite a lengthy question, but if you can take a shot at it, there are about, I think, two questions sort of combined together, and feel free to take a shot at it.
Oh, that's quite a few questions, Akash, but I think very important ones as well. So maybe I'll take a dab at it first, and Astha, chime in, please. I would definitely need your perspective here as well. So, how can organizations balance the need for innovation and technology advancement with the need to support train employees who may struggle to keep up with the changes, especially when where there is technology is not pervasive? Of course, I think organizations have to put the extra effort, Akash. I mean, if there is a need for everyone to be innovative and bring the best out of what they are here for a job, organizations than making any other strategy should ensure that we are providing enough tools, resources for them to learn through technology. And this could be micro learning. It may not be large training programs spread over 100 days. That's going to be very difficult and I think not sustainable. So micro learning is going to be very, very important. And access to this learning or micro learning should be at the fingertip. I think that's very, very important because people are in different time zones, people are in different work streams, people are attending to different nature of work as well. That means to say that learning may not happen at the same time for everyone. So can we make the micro learnings available for our employees at a touch of a button? Which it could be as simple as, can I have the micro learning on WhatsApp, right? So that it's easily available and understandable by somebody who's not so tech savvy as well. That's very important. Think that, so the organizations need to balance the learning initiatives in those ways. And maybe Astha, your thoughts on that, and then we can take the rest half of the question.
Yeah, that I think there are like four questions in that one question. But yeah, I think micro learning is a great idea. And also one more thing that I've seen work is, having these voluntary support groups where some people volunteer maybe once a week or twice a week to teach something or help support with something that they feel comfortable with, and the next week it's someone else who is comfortable with something else. So I think creating these small forums where people can discuss and ask their questions, because one thing I've seen with people who may not be very comfortable with technology is that they sometimes have to use technology to understand technology, and that can become difficult, right? So creating a way that people can in person ask the questions that they want and then get help with technology might help. That's something I've seen. Yeah. Do you want to
Yeah,
answer the
yeah, no,
next
so
one?
just adding to that, Asan, I think during the COVID time and when all of us had to work in the remote workplaces, it was technology that kept all of us together. And I think there was a lot of location, like even, far-fetched regions where they had to go and pivot themselves or learn and upskill. And I think organizations really pulled their weight to ensure that there is some kind of upskilling or micro learning that happens. I know
True.
I've seen sessions on how to attend or log into Zoom and take calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that kind of sessions. So I think it's constant learning and helping each other what works actually.
And
So I
not
don't know.
assuming the
Yeah,
basics as well, right? Like not assuming that people know the basics as well, right?
Correct.
Many times people just assume that yeah, of course people will know how to share their screen. Some people don't, right? So these small things I think is the responsibility of the organization to just bridge the gap. Yeah.
cool. So Mitch, can you flash the question again? I think we've sort of lost
No,
the
it's
thread.
it's yeah. I can probably just
It's
say
here, it's
also.
here. It's,
Also, are there cultural differences in how different generations approach learning and adapting to the new technology? If so, how does one imbibe that into their mindset and keep conscious of biases that may come up? Wow. Of course, I mean, learning for every generation is going to be different, and which is why we believe that any generation will learn from micro learning, micro courses. It's the easiest way. And simplifying. We should not have very fancy tools that kind of make even navigation difficult. I understand that we have so much of technology these days that certain tools are so difficult and not UI friendly at all. So for someone who's from who's probably a 50-60 year old, I mean, they will need support, they will need guidance. But I do believe that a lot of peer learning helps,
yeah.
right? Peer learning helps, and many a times if you don't, I mean, they may feel comfortable with a friend, a colleague who's there by their side to tell them how to navigate that and probably learn through it. And and for such things, I don't believe assessment should ever happen, because it kind of sometimes demotivates them. So even if it means that it doesn't work the first time, let them try and learn it 100 times. It's fine, because they will just figure it out their way. I think so. That's how we'll have to kind of help the generations in terms of learning to new technologies. Astha.
I I agree, Shilpa. I just agree with you on everything. Honestly, I agree. And then just to address the last question, which was about biases, I think the most obvious way to be conscious of biases is to tell yourself that, hey, maybe I don't know of all the biases I have, right? I probably have a lot of unconscious biases. So if I am assuming something, let me go back and reflect and think about why I'm assuming that, right? And I think that's the only way to address bias, right? To educate yourself, and tell yourself that, hey, maybe I don't know everything I have a bias for. Because I mean I definitely have a lot of biases, even though I
All
very
of
conscious.
us.
All of us, right?
All of us.
So that just seems like the obvious.
Great. I mean, I have like, a host of questions that we haven't responded to, but we will take them on email and Shilpa, we will pass it on to you as well, and we'll respond to our participants. But as a closing to whatever we spoke, if I may call it mantra, one mantra, Asta, from you and Shilpa, on how corporate India can be future ready with respect to generational diversity. I know in different forms we've answered this throughout the session, but like I said, there is one or two mantra that organizations can follow.
I think um, talk to each other, don't assume things, and it's let people bring them with their full selves to work, right? No matter how what they are, right? Which generation they are, or whether that's their personality. I think that'll itself solve a lot of problems. We just need to let people bring their full selves to work. Yeah.
That's a great mantra, Asta. And Shilpa, any thoughts from you?
My thought is very simple. I'll say inclusion is the only way to make this a Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So if it's one world, inclusion is the only way out. Nothing else. Nothing can beat that. So that would be my part.
Great perspective, Shilpa. And as much as I enjoy this conversation and want to keep it longer, we've already overshot the time. And thank you for such amazing insights on how we can truly embrace generational diversity, thereby translating into better collaboration and engagement at the workplace. With that, we come to the close of the session. Thank you so much, Asta, Shilpa, Deepthi, and Mitch for the back-end support, and participants for wonderful questions. And I must take Akash's name, for clubbing about 4 questions in one. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you,
Have a
Akash.
wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Smita. Thank you, Shilpa.
Bye.
Thanks, Smita.